Hi, Artie here. Happy Autism Acceptance Month. Sometimes things can take a while to fall into place, and that's what this video is all about. Knowing who you are and understanding yourself is so important, and I've had a number of big epiphanies along my journey so far. I'm sure there'll be more, but every single one of them has helped me to be more comfortable in myself, to find communities of people I can relate to, and just be happier existing in the world. When I was 17, I worked out I was ace. It wasn't a huge thing because I'd already sort of known that about myself, I just didn't have the words for it, but finding that word meant I found a community of others I could relate to and felt a lot less alone. Figuring out I was non-binary was a much bigger shock. I think I first encountered the word a bit before turning 18. I had never even come across the concept before, so it took me ages just to accept it in myself and to even think about telling anyone else. And it just, when I did, I started to realize that everything changed in a way that just made so much more sense. But we're not here to talk about gender and sexuality. We're here to talk about my specific brand of neurodiversity and the journey it took me to get from realization to diagnosis, all as an adult. This timeline is a bit long and very clunky. 2015 is the first time I accessed a service for mental health care, after being in denial about having anything going on at all for the entirety of my high schooling. I am diagnosed with some form of anxiety or depression by multiple different healthcare professionals. I don't stay with any of them for that long because I find that therapy is not working for me that much, except for when I'm in a crisis situation. I think it was 2016 when my first autistic friend identified me as one of their kin. I was very shocked and surprised, and I think they were too, that I didn't identify as autistic, but it just wasn't something I'd ever considered before. So I sort of dismissed it after that, but when 4 more friends said the same thing, and 2 of them about ADHD as well, I started to think that, you know what, maybe they're seeing something in me that I just haven't considered before, so I started to consider it. I started to do some thinking and a bit of research, and I realized pretty quickly how much I identified with the experiences of people in these 2 communities. I don't trust myself though. Similarly to when I worked out that non-binary was a thing, I spend a lot of time asking myself, is this actually what's going on, or do I just want to be different? It's special. I decide as a result that I am not going to identify myself as either autistic or having ADHD until I receive a formal diagnosis. But I don't pursue this because the healthcare system is big and scary and I've already got enough on my plate. November 2017. I start a job that nearly kills me. Navigating the healthcare system doesn't seem like an optional side quest anymore. It's necessary for my survival. I start with a local GP. May 2018. After taking medication prescribed to me by my GP for depression and anxiety with no positive results, I am referred to a psychiatrist. When I go to see him, I decide I'm not going to tell him anything about what I've been thinking. I want to see what he says and I don't want to influence him at all. It turns out he's a little bit of a eugenicist, but when the session ends, he tells me he thinks I might be autistic and refers me to someone to pursue a diagnosis. I don't access that service because I can't afford it. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has decided to remain undiagnosed because of the high expenses associated with diagnostic testing. This is where I got extremely lucky. In September 2017, I became a theoretical NDIS participant. I say theoretical because I'm not functional enough to manage my own plan, and the support coordinator who was put on to help me basically didn't exist. Add to this, I'm in a crisis situation, so pretty much I am not able to use any of my funds at all. It gets to August before I am finally contacted by the replacement of my non-existent support coordinator. She's actually really good, and she unfortunately tells me we can't use NDIS funding to access that particular service that I was referred to before, the one I couldn't afford, because the NDIA doesn't really like us using fundings for diagnostic testing programs like that one. But I can use it for regular psychology sessions, and there is a psychologist just around the corner who is qualified to diagnose ADHD and autism at least part of the way. So I start seeing her, and we'll see what she thinks. So I start seeing that psychologist in October. In the meantime, I decide to use my funds to learn how to drive. Part of that process means I need to get a psychiatrist to fill out a form for Vic Roads. So I don't really want to go back to the one I saw before because eugenicist. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find another psychiatrist within the time frame they've given. They've given me 1 month. So I do a bit of hunting, and eventually I find one an hour and a half away. I say to myself, you know what, it's just a one-off to fill out a form, it's fine, I'll just go. I go to see that psychiatrist in November, again taking the approach of not saying anything about what I've been considering to see what he's leaning towards. He starts trying to see if I'll fit into the criteria for bipolar 2, but I clearly don't, so he sort of abandons that and just goes with the classic depression-anxiety combo that everyone's come up with for most of my life, which is fine. That's more than sufficient for the form, and that's all I'm here for, right, is to fill out the form. So I take that and I move on. He asks if I can make an appointment with him in 6 months' time. I'm like, sure, I might need to cancel it. I don't really want to come out here. It's pretty far, but you know what? It's always good to have something in my calendar just in case the whole world goes to chaos. February 2019, I complete a bunch of abstract tests with my psychologist. She confirms that she thinks I'm autistic with inattentive type ADHD. She puts those thoughts and the reasonings behind it in a rather extensive report, which she tells me to take to a psychiatrist. She unfortunately cannot get any further with the diagnostic process. It does need to be handed off. So I ask my support coordinator to help me find a psychiatrist in the area. She makes a note of it, but unfortunately in 2 weeks she moves on from her role and into a different business. I haven't seen her since. So I get a new support coordinator. He's really lovely, but he seems to think I'm capable of doing more than I am, leaving me with lists of tasks that I just can't get through on my own. And so June rolls around and I haven't found anyone else. I go back to that psychiatrist from 6 months ago. This time I give him the report from my psychologist. He makes me fill out a bunch of tests and questionnaires, and at the end of it he tells me that I meet the criteria for ADHD and autism. I leave with the script for ADHD medication, and I tell myself that I can finally accept the things I've been quietly thinking to myself for all this time. I don't, not immediately, but I can. I keep seeing him for ADHD medication management. I don't bring up autism again because you can't really treat it with medication, and I'm already seeing a psychologist for all of the sort of work, face-to-face talking work anyway. I co-write and perform in a show about the concept of help, particularly from an autistic perspective. Our opening night, in the beginning of August, has a Q&A afterwards, wherein an audience member asks the cast if any of us are autistic. I raise my hand, publicly identifying myself as such for the first time ever. I write a show about myself and my identity. A huge part of it is about how realizing my specific brand of neurodivergence has allowed me to let go of some of the other more harmful ways I was thinking about myself. Crazy, lazy, weird. I perform it towards the end of September. I'm finally starting to accept that my neurodivergence is a huge part of me and that it really affects every aspect of my life. October comes around and I have my NDIS plan review approaching. It would be a good idea to bring with me some supporting documentation detailing all of my diagnoses, so I ask my psychiatrist if he'll write a letter. I receive the letter and I read it, and it lists a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and ADHD. There's something missing, and I'm not entirely sure why. I want to bring it up the next few times I see him, but I don't. I'm afraid. It feels like I'm challenging him and his decision making, which is really not what I intend to do, but that piece of paper didn't match up with what I remembered, and I just want to know why. We just do medication management instead. February 2020. I ask him if we can continue to consider autism, that I don't remember why we dropped it before. He tells me I left it too late in the session and that we're out of time, and asks me to bring it up at the beginning of my next session. March. I bring it up again, straight away this time. He tells me he didn't diagnose me because you can't really take a medication to treat autism, and he was hoping that in treating my ADHD that I would basically have most of my issues covered. I tell him that I still think it's worth pursuing because it would help me deal with the NDIS and maybe access a bunch of other supports that I currently don't have access to. He gets me to fill out a bunch of forms again, and the result is the same as last time. I forward him another copy of the report from my psychologist. He tells me we will finish this next time. April. That next appointment is tonight. As of the time of this recording, I still do not have an official autism diagnosis. I thought I did for about 4 months, but that was a misunderstanding, and so I'm still waiting. I have not gone doctor shopping. It has not been held up by people reading me differently to how I thought they would, and then me having to find someone who would read me the way I wanted. It's been held up by bureaucracy, by wait lists, by my own anxieties, my inability to make appointments on my own, things like that. And I'm tired. I am. I'm ready for this process to finish and for it all to be in a beautiful little place of certainty. But we're not there yet. I'm hoping that I get an answer tonight. If I do, it will be how I end this video, but I'm very aware that this could go on for months and months more. I do have an ADHD diagnosis, and that is a huge weight off my shoulders. It explains so much about me, but it doesn't quite get all the way. And I would really love to just have that bit of clarity. I'm not the kind of person who believes that you can only call yourself autistic once you've been formally diagnosed. I think that's an incredibly privileged position to hold. Most of the services that diagnose autistic people are catered towards children, which means you'd have to have the particular kind of autism that gets picked up in children. It means that you need to have a community that is aware of things like autism, that has the ability and funds to be getting children into therapy and stuff like that. That's just as a child. If you're an adult, your most accessible and easy to find options are incredibly expensive. Even the harder, longer road that I ended up taking was really only possible to me because I am an NDIS participant, and there are so many people who can't get onto that despite having lived with a disability their entire life. Some people live so far away from the closest mental health service, let alone one that's informed enough in the right types of areas to be able to do this. And there are people who encounter prejudice that stops them from getting diagnosed. It would be really, really, really shitty of me to imply that all of those people who have not had the good fortune to be able to have all the pieces fall into place are not autistic just because they haven't been able to get diagnosed. So if I believe this, why am I even bothering to seek a diagnosis? Isn't it a lot of stress and energy for someone who doesn't even believe it's necessary? I don't believe it is needed, but I think for me, I need it. I will not feel comfortable advocating for myself and for people like me unless I have it on someone else's authority that I am not speaking over someone, that I am not taking up space I don't belong in, that I have a right to be an advocate, and I am by nature an advocate. So that's why. And I hope it's the day, but maybe not. We'll see either way. Artie from a few hours later. In line with kind of what I expected, this isn't over yet. My psychiatrist was happy to verbally confirm for me what he thought, but says he needs to do more reading before he's willing to put anything on paper. It's basically the same thing he said to me last time, and he hasn't done it. So I don't know how many months this is going to be the same thing being heard every time. I don't know. It's so close yet so far. Find out on the 6th of May, I suppose. It is not easy to be diagnosed with autism as an adult. I think if you learn anything from this video, it's that. So yeah, don't be hard on people who don't have the privilege to go through all of this. Like, it's incredibly taxing on one's mental health care as well. So yeah, love each other, look after yourselves, and boycott autism speaks. I don't think I need to tell you all that, but some people need to hear that. Anyway, bye.